research about effective communication. So what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about a few things, but before we get started, I know you probably all know each other, and so I don't have to do an icebreaker and have you name yourselves and tell where you come from, because we've done that. But what I would like to know is each one of you could tell me, would you rather have more time or more money, and why? In 2 minutes or less. So let's start with Meredith. Go ahead.
Sure. I would rather have more time. I just believe it's more valuable, and I think that no matter where you put your energy is how you make your life. So if you have more time, then you have a better chance to make a better life.
Great. Michaela.
That's really hard. Isn't there a saying that's like time is money, so more time equals more money? So I guess I'll go with time.
Okay.
Get both.
All right. Tori, go ahead.
Good question, right?
Yeah.
I would like more time and the wisdom to use it well. So more doesn't necessarily mean better. But I guess if I had a third choice, it would probably be wisdom to use the time I have, actually. But there you go. Good question.
Thank you. Okay. Robin?
I'm going to go straight for the money.
All right.
With that question, I have had a lot of life experiences, a lot of different professions, some of which had paid a lot and some not a lot. And I have felt that with more money for me has come more time. So that's what I'm looking for at this phase of my life.
All right, no problem. Sasha.
I believe I would probably pick more time as well. So I have my children at the age of getting married, and my sister's going through some things. So just life in general, to be able to split up time between everything. I got my first grandbaby being born in January. So
hey, congratulations.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, I definitely pick more time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mariah, Tom told me to tell you hello.
Hi, it's nice to see you. I would go with more time, especially with the holidays right around the corner. I'm already missing family, so definitely more time for me.
Okay. Jessica.
Hi. I think it depends on how much time we're talking about, but my first instinct was more time. And then I was like, well, more money would be nice too, because I really like to travel. But with everything that's been going on personally in my life in the last year, definitely more time to spend with those that I love and, you know, cherish those moments.
Yeah. Julie.
Hello, everyone. I would say more time. I mean, time is money, they say, right? And, you know, money can't solve everything, and you only have an infinite amount of time in a day to get out of it what you want and what others want from you. So I would say time.
Okay, thank you. Diane.
Sorry, I was late. I was in another meeting. Gosh, that's a tough question because Robin made me think about it differently. So, because if you have money, then you can hire people to do some of the time things that you don't like so much. But, and I also like, I'm sorry, who said about more wisdom to use their time well?
Yeah,
I think that's quite often me. So thank you, Tori.
So you're going with time?
Yeah, I think I'd go with time.
Okay. Is that everybody? Did I miss anyone? Okay. So I would go with time. And the reason I would go with time is because I would love to go for more money. And I would say whatever time I have, I will just spend the heck out of it. But I would love to, at this point, I'm going for more time because it's really important to me to be around for my kids, grandkids, and great grandkids. So now it's time. A couple of years ago, I'd have said money. So time wins in this case. And it's interesting because I would, a lot of times people would think, oh, just give me more money. Time isn't promised to anybody, so I'll just take money. You can always make more money, but you can't get more time. So I think I'd like to go with time, and that's a good reason to pick time, and I'm glad that time won. Because the more time you have, the more time you have to make more money if it's possible. So I would like to go with time. So thank you all for sharing. So let's move into our workshop. So today the objectives are going to be, we're going to talk about some communication types. We're going to talk about communication styles. We're going to talk about listening skills, which is extremely important to communication. And we're going to talk about barriers to communication. And then we'll round it out with tips for more effective communication. A lot of times we think we said something, people heard it, they understand, or if they don't, they heard it, so they know, and we move on. But communication is really, really important. It's really important in communication that what you want to be heard is heard the way you want it to be. And so we're going to talk about that. Otherwise, communication can be construed. So let me just show you something. So the thing is we want to know what real communication is. It's the process of transferring signals and messages between the sender and the receiver through various methods. And we'll talk about those, written, nonverbal cues, and all that, and spoken words. It's also a mechanism that we use to establish and modify relationships. It's important to our everyday life. You need it in order to get a job. You need it in order to buy things. You need it to establish new relationships and to resolve conflicts, be they between friends or family members, romantic partners, or co-workers. So if you listen carefully to a speaker, you will absorb most of the words, and you will also notice more than just words. You understand the important message the person seeks to convey to you. Listening properly also helps prevent conflict, as you're more likely to hear and understand clearly than if you're only concerned with getting across your own issues. Miscommunication leads to complication. And I'm going to show you a quick picture. Pretty effective, I think, for communication. This is why we lift on 3, because the patient is on the floor, so, which is not a good thing. If you're the patient, you don't want to know about these things. So when we talk to someone, there are internal and external noises. There's thoughts, there's outside noises, there's channels and avenues of communication. So what we have, there we go. What we have is a sender, the speaker. The speaker has a message, and that message goes through a channel, either verbally or through phone, through Zoom, through person to person, standing next to each other. And then there are the barriers, which is the noise, and we'll talk more about those outside noises and those inside noises as we go. And then there is, oops, it keeps moving, I'm sorry. And then there's the receiver. So now the receiver's got this information, it needs to be decoded, right? You're listening, so the information needs to be decoded, and then you give feedback or respond, and you respond through a channel, either email or voicemail or whatever it is, text message. Given the new technology that we've come across today, thanks to COVID, and smart people, really, really technically smart people, there are many, many more ways to communicate. I can't even imagine doing this workshop right now for the first time via Zoom. The first time I did it back in 2016 or 17, it was in person. No one knew anything about Zoom. I think we knew about texting and we knew about phones and things, but Zoom, What was Zoom? No one knew what Zoom was. So now we've got all these various channels of information transferring. And again, the noise, we have to think about the noise, and that noise are our thoughts, outside noises, background noises, things that we're thinking about, things that we're seeing, and all of this is noise in the middle of a conversation. And so we have to be aware of that when we are transmitting and receiving information through communication. Okay, any questions so far? Great. So now we're going to talk about communication types. There's formal versus informal. So that's business or personal. And obviously, when it's a business conversation, you use different tones, you use different words. When it's personal, if it's you and your family, that's another way of talking to people. If it's you and your besties, that's an entirely different way of talking to people. So there's that formal and informal. A lot of times we try not to mix the two. I'm sometimes good at that. And then other times I usually just, things just kind of get all meshed in together. And that's okay, as long as the message you convey is the message that the person receives that you want them to receive. So that's the thing to remember when it comes to communication. And then there's the verbal, which is face-to-face, electronically with all the new technology, written, either snail mail or email or a note or sticky note. There's a lot of ways. And then there are visuals, there are signs, stop signs, yield signs, do not enter here sign, please put on a mask sign. Those are forms of communication. Then there's nonverbal communication, which is our body language. And we'll talk a lot about body language. And then it's not just our body language when we're conveying a message, it's also our receiver's body message as they're listening. So we'll talk about that also. And then there are listening skills, which is also a part of nonverbal communication. And we will also talk about that. Any questions so far? Anytime you have a question, just stop me. I can't see everybody on the screen, so you can just go ahead and talk and I'll stop. Okay, so we talk about verbal communication. And again, you see the little circle of the receiver, the sender, the message, the communication, and the feedback, how that goes in communication. It's an ongoing process. So that includes your speech and your attentiveness. It's really important that your attentiveness to speech is paid attention to, because you want to hear the words. There's also the tone that is used when you talk to someone and when they respond to you. There's the communication consistency, being that you understand what the person's saying and what you're saying sticks to the message you're trying to convey. Sometimes people talk, I don't know if any of you, probably not, or some of you may have ever seen this show Blossom years ago. And she had a friend on that show that would just talk really, really fast. And she went to 5 different subjects in like 30 seconds. Consistency. Let's stick to one topic at a time. So that's really important too when we're talking about effective communication and getting a particular message across. If I tell you that it's raining outside and this is going to be a great workshop, and I'm going to remember to pick up my kids and put water in their water bottles, I just told you 4 things in less than 15 seconds. And you're like, what is she trying to tell us, right? So we have to be careful and we have to slow down. Now, I will tell you from personal experience that really, really thinking about how you communicate, thinking about why you're communicating, and then thinking about who you're communicating to is extremely important in the overall success of a communication. You have to know who you're talking to, why you're talking to them, and what it is you want them to know. If we don't give this some serious thought, we end up like Blossom's friend, and whoever's listening ends up not knowing anything. They just like, why was that person here? So it's really important to pay attention to that. There's also patience. And I implore you to always be patient, because Sometimes people are a little hesitant to talk, and we'll talk about different styles and that sort of thing. Also, they may be not quite sure how they're going to come across or how they want to tell you what it is they're trying to tell you. So it's good to have patience when you are having a conversation and communicating with someone. It also helps to slow down, and it gives you a chance to think about what has been told to you as opposed to just speaking to respond, which is what we kind of normally sort of do. And then practice, 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 practice. Think about the next time you have a conversation with someone, whoever that is. You may be thinking right now, as soon as this workshop's done, I've got to call, my mate and tell them this, or I've got to call my kids and tell them that. Think about that conversation and think about how you're about to communicate with them. We don't usually think about it. We just talk. We just talk and our hands start moving, or we walk and, we figure everything is straight, she heard me, it's done. And so really give it some time, give it some patience, and think about it. Think about communication in a good way. Kind of think about it like you do the time that you want to have or the money that you want to have. Okay. So let's communicate. Let's think about this. Sometimes we hear things and we wonder, what did we just hear? And so it takes some time. So let's say, let's talk about what I call interpretation of meaning. So in this little activity, I'm gonna give you like 5 statements and ask anyone to tell me what I meant, okay? So first one is, the chicken is ready to eat. What am I saying to you?
You want people to eat chicken right now.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh, I heard like the chicken is hungry.
I see.
That's what I heard too, that it's time to go feed the chickens.
Oh goodness. Okay, I did not get that. Wow, guys.
So
I got what you got, Tori.
Tori's like, I'm hungry. Where's the chicken?
And I also know you, Tandala, so I'm imagining you would tell your kids that to drink.
Yes.
I don't know.
I know. But so when I say that chicken is ready to eat, there are 2 different interpretations for that. There could be 3. Anybody think of anything else that meant? Did it mean something different to anyone else? So that's why you have to be careful. Now here's another one. One morning I killed a spider in my pajamas.
Ooh. Like the spider was in the pajamas and they killed it.
It was in your pajamas and you killed it?
Or you were in pajamas and you killed it.
Right. Ew, ew, ew. Either way.
Either way, yeah. So there, again, another interpretation. Well, let's think about this one. I'll get back to you in a bit.
I feel like people's interpretations and definitions of bit are all over the place. Like for some people, I know it's like a week. If I say that, it is like a day.
Mm-hmm. And for other people, it might be 5 minutes. As soon as I get back from the bathroom, or as soon as I kill this spider, I'll get back to you in a bit. So that again, this is where the patience and the practice comes in. Here's another one. Do you know it's after midnight? What am I saying?
I don't know anybody named after midnight. So no, I don't know them.
That's good. That's a good interpretation. Yeah, that's a really good one.
I guess I thought, what is the it's referring to? Like, is it now 12:05 or is something else going to happen, an event?
Yeah. Lots of different interpretations to just a few words. And the last one I have for you is, you're not going to die.
Yet.
Yet.
Sorry.
This is a good one. Yeah, there's so just thinking about those phrases and you're just like, okay, what does that mean? What exactly is that saying? So that's why when we start to communicate, we have to think about what it is we're going to say and how we're going to say it. Because these are like just statements that you've all used or heard before, you know, and you probably don't think anything of it. You think, I just told you the chicken was ready to eat. And if you've got chickens in the yard and one in the oven, people are going to wonder, what's she talking about? What's he mean, right? They're going to wonder about that. They're also going to wonder whether or not you were wearing pajamas or the spider was in your pajamas. And you just think, one morning I killed a spider in my pajamas. And you know what that means, but the person who heard it didn't. So my question to you is, why don't you ever see the headline, "Psychic wins the lottery"? You don't have to answer that. That was actually my question. I'm like, every time, because there was a really big, I guess, a big thing a couple of weeks ago. There was a huge amount, billions or whatever, and everybody was like playing to win the lottery. I'm like, how come psychics never win? How come you never see that? You would think they would know. Just a little side question there. So remember, when you're communicating, to think about what you're saying and how you're saying it and what tone of voice you're using and who you're saying it to, and whatever other extenuating circumstances surrounding what you are about to say and how things might be interpreted that didn't come off like you wanted them to.
So in Tandala, some of the situations you mentioned would be interpreted in context of something else. Like if you're physically together, you would know a little bit more information about those, the chicken or the other situations. So it's context driven as well, so, or you're relational driven, things like that.
And it could be very much so. It could be, definitely.
Or like language driven. I mean, for those of us who work across multiple languages, like this communications piece in relation to language is huge for us, like every minute of our day.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a lot lost or misinterpreted in just the language part of it. And so trying to find better techniques of communication so that message is not lost is like something we're always thinking about.
Yes, definitely. Something to always keep in mind, most definitely. So let's take a little quick look at nonverbal communication. I don't think anybody needs any help interpreting that one, right? We can tell this cat does not like water or being held in this way. We could do several things. So nonverbal communication between people is communication through sending and receiving wordless clues. It includes the use of visual clues such as body language, how far or how close to someone you are in a conversation, if it's person to person, and your physical environment and your appearance. And then there's your voice and touch. Sometimes people walk over and they touch you on the arm and say something. So all of those things play when it comes to nonverbal communication. So if you look at this photo, we've got another one. Great nonverbal communication. She's happy about something. We don't have to try to figure it out, right? She looks like she's pretty darn stoked about something. And so that nonverbal communication between people is, again, those wordless clues. She could be happy because there's no school tomorrow. She could be happy because the chicken's ready to eat. She could be happy for a number of reasons, that she just could be glad the sun is shining. And so, those nonverbal clues are really, really important. And because we have new technology, so are these. These are important. You're on your phone, and for me, it's kind of hard to see the emojis. And so I don't know which one I'm picking, and they don't tell you what it says. And I'm like, which one means this or which one means that? And if you send the wrong one, you pop the wrong one in there and hit send, your receiver is like, what was that for? You know what I mean? So it's really hard, but all these are different types of nonverbal communication. I texted my granddaughter this afternoon and asked her when was her fall vacation. I said, when is your fall break? Because I'm trying to figure out, when we can take another little family jaunt away from home for a little bit. And what she responded with was, bye. And I'm like, okay, does that mean you don't want to go? What does that mean? And she goes, it's like, bruh. So I'm older. I'm still trying to figure out what that is, but I got it. She was just like, whatever. Again, another form of communication, another thing. So we have to be careful what we say and who we're talking to. Obviously, if she had sent that message to her friends, they would have known exactly what she meant. I didn't. And I'm trying to keep up. I'm trying to learn, trying to keep up with stuff. So it's always good to think about. Some other forms of nonverbal communication. There are sounds, there's laughing, there's ways of talking, different pauses, stress on words. There's your posture, like if you're slouching. For example, if I were talking to you with my hand on my chin right now, I could give you a totally different impression of how I feel about this workshop, right? Or there's the appearance. And, if my hair was just like all over my head or something, and, it wasn't the style, then you could be like, okay, that's weird, but okay. And then there's head movement. Everybody's seen the head movement when people get upset. And then there are hand movements, hands waving. People talk a lot with their hands, eye movements, winking, rolling their eyes, all of those, waving at someone. And then there are facial expressions, whether a person's smiling, whether they're just stoic, and whether or not they're frowning or look like they're about to cry or have a question mark on their face, all these things. And all these things are really, especially facial expressions, eye movements, and head movements, are really important, especially now with Zoom. I've lost count, obviously, of how many Zoom meetings I've been in the last year, but I noticed people's faces a lot more now because that's all I can see is their face. And I am envious of those people who can keep that stoic face and you don't know what they're thinking. And then it takes everything I have not to laugh when I can read somebody's face and their face is like, this is something I could have gotten in an email instead of a 30-minute meeting. You can tell. So now we have to be even more aware of our nonverbal communication because the only thing we have is looking at each other on this little screen in these little boxes. So it's really, really important, that nonverbal communication. So also I want you to remember that researchers suggest that 80% of what we communicate involves our actions and gestures versus only 20% that is conveyed using words. So something to think about. It's got a lot to do with how a person looks, and sometimes it's what you don't say that counts. Someone can say something to you like, the chicken is ready to eat, and your face could be like, oh. So what does that mean? That means chicken again, or I gotta feed them, one of the two. So, but it shows in your face. So we have to be careful about what message we want to convey completely, what total message we're conveying when we do things. Now this one, I liked this one. I thought it was pretty interesting because we probably, you get up in the morning, it's time to go to work or do whatever you got to do, and you throw some clothes on. And we've just come out of COVID, a lot of people are dressing differently now. What used to be quote unquote professional is not anymore. It's okay that I've been wearing tennis shoes for the last year and a half because my feet aren't used to heels anymore. And I'd rather just err on the side of caution and not wear heels and fall. So I keep flat shoes on. But what message does that convey depending on who I'm about to talk to, which is extremely interesting. So you look at these different photographs of different people and how they're dressed. what made me think about this was there was an article about a woman who was the manager at a restaurant, and whenever people had complaints, they were looking for the man. And she didn't understand why, when her tag said manager, they walked past her looking for someone else. And it didn't bother me any, but she had purple hair and she had some kind of fixture in her nose, which doesn't bother me either. And so the comments were, well, maybe if you looked professional. What is professional now? What is acceptable and what is not acceptable? And now it depends, I think, on the age group, on a person's mindset. And what I used to think was, oh my gosh, I would never wear that. It's just like, oh, that's perfect. I'm getting one of those. So it's a little bit different. And so I guess it depends on the message you're trying to convey, depending on your audience or your receiver of this communication as to how you might want to dress. If you want people to think that you're smart, you might wear glasses, whether they're prescription or not. Or if you're going for a job interview, you might want to wear a suit or a skirt and a jacket to look more, quote unquote, professional, because that's what it was. However, if you're going for a construction job, the guy in the t-shirt and the jeans and the tennis shoes, he's ready to go to work. If he gets hired, yeah, I can throw on a tool belt and go right now. He's ready to go. So it just depends. So all of the different things that you may see in a person is not saying that this means it's not open to communication or that means he's impatient and ready to leave. It depends on the receiver as to their perception of what they're seeing. So it's difficult to judge, and we can't judge because everyone's different. But these are non-verbal communication signs, and it's hard to tell what's good and what's not. And so therefore, we have to always consider the receiver of our communication, whatever that is or however that is communicated. If it's via email, you really have to choose your words carefully, because emails don't have a tone unless you add one. You can add one with certain words, but basically they don't have a tone. And the message you might be trying to convey may not come across very well that way. Obviously, with verbal communication, it's a lot easier. But with all the nonverbal ways that we communicate, it's really difficult to get people sometimes to understand what we mean. So it's really important to think about that. Any questions so far? Okay. Still on nonverbal communication. So there are some challenging assumptions. And what I want to do is I would like to give you some examples of nonverbal communication and give you something to think about. So in the first example, the story is Tina is asking her supervisor for a raise. He looks at his watch and she interprets that nonverbal gesture as a signal that he doesn't want to discuss the subject and begins to get up. Tina's supervisor looks at his watch to make sure he has enough time to discuss with Tina what a raise would entail for her. He's glad she had the gumption to ask for the raise. He needs to let her know what the raise will be, that the raise will be part of a promotion, and he'll let her know that the new job has added responsibilities and needs confirmation from Tina that she's up to it. He's surprised Tina is about to get up and leave, and he wonders what is wrong. What does that interpretation tell you about Tina? So she saw her boss look at his watch and she just decided to get up and get ready to leave.
So she probably thought when he did that, like, oh, he doesn't have time. That's not why he was looking at his watch. He was making sure he did have time, but she was like, oh, he
Yeah.
doesn't have time. I'm not gonna waste his time, maybe.
It's really important that we interpret several ways as opposed to one immediately and go with it. Because if she had sat and waited, perhaps he would have spoken and squashed all of her interpretations of he doesn't want to talk about it, right? So that's real important.
One of the things we tend to do in that kind of nonverbal communication is make an assumption, and instead of check it out, instead of say, hey, do you think you have the time? And just ask. I see you looked at your watch. Do you have the time? And then,
Yes.
Sometimes depending on our own moods or our relationship with that person, we might tend to the negative or we might tend to the positive. There's a whole lot of context in the relationship that way too. So
Exactly. In the relationship, there are a lot of things to be taken into consideration with that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now here's a second example. Whoops. Here we go. So Bob is getting ready to go to lunch. He picks up a trade magazine to read while eating lunch and he heads for the exit. He runs into a group of his coworkers who are in the hallway chatting with each other. They look at each other without saying a word, and some of them say hi to him and move on. Bob thinks they're all going out to lunch together without him. He figures he just caught them planning to leave for lunch without inviting him to join them. And he concludes that's why they looked at each other knowingly. What Bob doesn't know is that his coworkers had just been talking about him. So they had been talking about him. They had been concerned about Bob just hurrying out to lunch all the time by himself. And they noticed that he stopped going out to lunch with them and seemed to be preoccupied with something else all the time. And they were worried about him. So it's kind of like, ooh, again, a chance to say something or not say something. If you were Bob, would you say something?
I would. I mean, they're people I work with every day. I would at least, if it's lunchtime, I would be like, hey, you guys going to lunch? I'm not embarrassed to invite myself to lunches with people, so.
Yeah. Yeah, not a bad idea to say, hey, are you guys going, where you guys going for lunch? Are you guys going out for lunch? Where are you going? That sounds a lot better than what I got in this bag here. It's just, there's a way. And then when they get to lunch, they could talk to him about how they feel. But if he's interpreted that, they are not inviting him, then all sorts of things end up happening. He gets an attitude, doesn't talk to him. Business is, real communication, business conversations are stifled because that's weighing in his mind that they don't want to be with me or something's wrong with me, and just snowball effect of communication and miscommunication and interpreting things and making assumptions, right? So
right.
that's something you want to look at.
Excuse
and
me,
then go ahead. Yes.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just have to say I love that answer, Robin. I love that about you. And I had my own little incident with that. There was a group knitting in the conference room, and we were prepping the room for a presentation, and the knitting group of people came in with their knitting stuff. And I said, oh, that looks really cool. And I made the comment like, oh, I wasn't invited, kind of like whiny. And somebody said, well, it was on the team staff chat. And I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. That's why I didn't, I don't pay attention to that so much. Like, oh, you guys have fun. So yeah, so I mean, checking it out instead of going, oh, woe is me,
I actually think this scenario happens a lot in workplaces. Like, I can think of at least 3 situations right now at my workplace where this is the situation, and the only thing I can do to mitigate it at all is just be like, please just go communicate with that person or those people. Like, there's so much of that insecurity that we build up for no reason, and then it starts affecting, the quality of work. So, but I guess I don't have, besides encouraging people to just be open communicators and confront things, I don't know if I have other tools in my toolkit, as advice to give other people who are feeling, that insecurity.
Mhm. That makes sense, makes sense. But you're right, it just makes sense to just have the conversation. If it's really bothering you that much that things can snowball in your mind. And like I said, again, take effect on in other aspects of your relationship with that person if you don't clear the air and at least clear up that particular situation that you have perhaps misinterpreted. So it's good to just, like you said, just say it, go communicate with that person, talk to them, tell them what you felt and tell them, ask them, are they on the right track or what's going on? And I've had that happen to me where, you see a person walk by you and say something really rude and you're like, whoa, we need to talk because I don't understand what happened. Did I miscommunicate something? And that really happened to me and a friend, and she was really angry, and I'm like, and she started in on me, and I'm like, whoa, you totally interpreted something that you saw the wrong way. And it happens a lot more than people let on, and it can cause, rifts in relationships. And it just, when just a little conversation could get that out of the way just so quickly. So thank you, Robin, for sharing that story, for sure. Definitely. I hope that person does go and talk to someone about that. And so there's a third story here. And the third one is that Tom is asking his supervisor, Frank, for a raise, and his supervisor looks at his watch and he interprets that gesture as a signal that Frank doesn't want to talk about a raise at that time and decides to test his suspicions. So he asks his boss, would you rather talk at another time? Do you have to leave now? And his supervisor looks surprised and says, why no, Tom? I don't have to leave now. We can discuss your request. So, and then Frank wonders why Tom asked him if he needed to leave now. And Frank realizes that he was looking at his watch absentmindedly and was caught by Tom doing so. Frank would rather not have the conversation today. He needs to let Tom know that his performance hasn't been up to par this year, so he's not slated for a raise. Frank is dreading this conversation with Tom. Notice that Tom's interpretation of Frank's gesture correctly, and that Frank gave him a verbal message that contradicted his nonverbal behavior. So when this happens, the nonverbal behavior is likely to convey the true message, as in that example, is that he really did not want to have that conversation. Now, I will say that the looking at the watch thing is something that I at this point am very aware of and careful of when people look at their watches. For example, if I'm in a meeting, I may look at my watch because my watch is one of the ones that my text messages come across. And it's easier for you to look at my watch than it is to pick up my phone and go dial in and look at the text message. If I just look at my watch, I can see the text message. And so there again, I'm careful of that because that's something that I do. I'm careful of that when someone else does it and looks at their watch or looks at their phone, because it could be a text message. It could have nothing whatsoever to do with not being interested, not wanting to hear what I have to say, or any of those things. We're on a Zoom call right now, and I could say when people shut their cameras off, they're doing something else. They could be picking their nose, they could be filling their glass with water, they could be, readjusting something. No, Tori, I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying. It's like, and sometimes people, they get all, worked up about that. It's like, I have this workshop and everybody turned off their cameras. What happened? And a lot of times it's got nothing to do with you or how you look or what you're saying. It's something else. So we have to be careful about how we interpret a message that's being given to us. And that's what the point of these nonverbal communication examples were about, is that we can easily get it wrong. And we need to take each gesture by itself without paying attention to other gestures and the words that are being spoken. Otherwise, we risk misinterpreting the message and therefore missing the point. As you know, when we're having conversations, we always want to talk about, understanding and making sure what you heard is what I said and that sort of thing. And so it's really important that we pay attention to those nonverbal cues and those verbal cues. And also make sure that we pay attention to whether or not our verbal cues match our nonverbal cues. It's like, are you ready to eat? It's like those are the sorts of things and signals and words and gestures that you get from little people. At least I do anyway, get them from little people. I can never quite tell where they're at. And if you're a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, you probably have the sense that you just want to hold them still and look at them in the face when you get their response, because that's the only way you can get a true response from a toddler, is because you got to stop them, because they got noise going 24/7. The cartoons are on and I want to go play with that toy, and the cat's messing with my thing, and there's just all kinds of things going on. The same for adults. There are lots of adults who have ADHD, for example, and so they've got a lot of noise going on too. And it's not that they don't want to listen to you or pay attention or accept the communication that you're giving them. It's just that sometimes they can't block out all the noise. And so we just have to remember that when we're communicating with people. So I'm glad you're all still here, still listening. And yes, I did just look down at my watch because I want to be aware of the time and not take up any more than I said I would today. So what I would like to do is give you a quick 10-minute break. Wait a minute, hold on. I'm having a mental lapse. Yes, it is 4:24. Did we start at 3? We started at 3:30. Okay, yes, I'm gonna give you a quick 10-minute break. Sorry. So it is 4:24. Let's go with 4:25. If you could all be back at 4:35, that would be great. So just take a quick minute, get some water, stretch. You can actually turn off your cameras and mute your microphones, and I'll be okay with that. And we'll be back in 10. Hey, Tori, can you tell me which screen you're seeing right now?
Yes, nonverbal communication, guy looking at his watch,
Okay, cool. All right.
and quiz. Uh-oh.
Okay, cool. 'Cause something weird happened to my thing here where I can't see what you see, but that's okay.
Oh.
There it is.
Oh, okay, got it.
Ah, now we good. Okay.
Good.
Took me a second. All right. So I've got 4:35. So we're gonna keep going, and we don't have much longer, but there's a couple of things I want to make sure I cover. And one of those is communication styles. Now, prior to the class, I sent over the communication styles quiz. And if you filled it out and tallied it, I'd like to know if you could each tell me which communication style you are. Whether you're A, B, C, or D, whether you're passive, passive-aggressive, aggressive, or assertive. Go
I
ahead.
didn't see a quiz. I'm sorry.
That's
I didn't
okay.
fill it out.
That's okay. If you do get a chance to fill it out, do, and just you can either let me know via email or just keep the information for yourself. And what I might do is if you email me, I can send you some information about assertive communication that I didn't send before. So anyone else? Anyone?
I learned that I'm probably a little bit more of the passive aggressive when I thought I was more assertive.
Okay. Anyone else?
I tend to lean more towards the passive communication style.
Okay. Okay.
I did not see it either, so that's why I'm not responding. So
Okay, no
sorry,
problem.
missed it.
No problem. So if you did do it and it gives you one of these, and here I give you a little blurb about what each one means. If you are passive, if you've got a passive behavior, you have the I don't express my needs, desires, and opinions directly, and I put others' needs above my own. And that is a you lose, they win situation. If you've got passive aggressive behavior, you indirectly make sure that others are aware of your needs and desires and opinions and give little or no thought to theirs. Therefore, you win and they lose, okay? The openly aggressive behavior is I am direct in expressing my needs, desires, and opinions, giving little or no thought to other people's needs, and that's when I win and you lose. And then there's the assertive behavior, which is clearly and directly expressing needs, desires, and opinions in a way which is considerate of others, which is the assertive behavior, and it's a I win, you win. So it's a win-win. And you don't have to feel like, oh my, I need to be more assertive. You are what you are. But if you'd like to be more assertive in the win-win situation, I've got a little handout that talks about that, assertive communication handout. Anyone can be assertive, and it doesn't take a lot to just decide I'm going to express how I feel, but I'm also going to take into consideration your feelings, and I'm not going to just discount them. Yes, I can definitely resend it. Let me see if I can send it right now because it's on my computer, and hopefully I can grab it really quick and send it out to you. And it's really a cool document. Let's see if it's gonna let me. Let's see here.
I mean, based on the definitions you just threw up there, or the styles rather, definitely in between those top two.
Yes. Yes, there are. Between the top two, aggressive and assertive. And yeah, there we go. Thank you so much. Yes. So yeah, there it is right there. And actually, being open, aggressive, and assertive is where a lot of people are. They probably aren't. They want to get their point across, so there's that aggressiveness, but they also want to be clear and direct. And considerate of others. So some people teeter there. A lot of people teeter on all of them. When I did it, I actually was extremely assertive, and I had no idea I was. And I only picked one of the points off of section A and all of them in section D, which really kind of surprised me. But I guess I'm learning to be assertive. Being assertive is good. Being openly aggressive, not so good. And being passive aggressive is not so good. Because you don't want to be passive aggressive if you can be, because you want people to know how you feel, but you also want to take into consideration theirs, but you want them to take into consideration how you feel also. So more of a win-win situation, okay? So that's that assertive versus aggressive that we talked about. And in the essence of time, this actual workshop could go for 3 hours in person for sure, because I have a whole bunch of exercises. But we won't go there because I don't want to, infringe on anyone else's time. So I will make sure that I get that handout to you about assertiveness. But what I want to talk to you now about is your listening skills. So listening, we listen to obtain information, we listen to understand, we listen for enjoyment, we listen to learn. So if you're finding it difficult to concentrate on what someone is saying, try repeating their words mentally as they say them. This not only gives you a chance to hear what they're saying, but it reinforces their message and helps you to stay focused. So listen carefully to a person speaking. Without listening, your response is not as likely to be as accurate or as useful as you think it will be unless you've listened. So it's really important that you do that. Listening is not the same as hearing. We hear music all day long. You can hear a song 10 times and not understand anything they're saying. I know that for a fact because I have a teenager in my house and I can listen to her music all day long. I'm never going to understand what she hears, but she does. So listening is not the same as hearing. And listening is one of the most important skills you can have. How well you listen has a major impact on your effectiveness and on the quality of the relationships that you have with others. So the issue, you just have to pay attention. You really need to listen. Listen to hear as opposed to listening to respond. It's really, really important. Because there are barriers to effective communication. There are process barriers, there are personal barriers. You're looking at that person. I don't know if I want to listen to her or him. You're looking at how they're dressed. You're looking at their body language, all those nonverbal cues you're paying attention to. There could be physical barriers. There's a screen between you two, or there's that glass window between you two, or they're on the other side of the counter. There are semantic barriers. There are cultural barriers that you may or may not even know about that a person has. And so all of these things need to be taken into account when we are communicating with someone, because there are all those barriers. And we already talked about the noise. And it's important that you not jump to conclusions about what you've heard. And so I love this little saying, I know that you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. And that's something to really think about, and something to say when someone comes back with a response that you're like, whoa, I don't think you heard what I said. And that's where that comes from, because the person thinks they heard what you said and they repeat back to you what you said, or they respond and you're like, oh, I don't think you heard what I said. That's not what I meant. You heard what I said, but that's not what I meant. And so it's really important that you say that if you believe that the person hasn't heard you correctly. If they said, oh no, I know what you said, I heard you clearly. Well, maybe they did, and that is their response. So it's hard to tell if they are paying attention as well as you are. So just keep that in mind also. And then remember the outside noise. Outside noise keeps us from hearing and keeps us from understanding. Any element that interferes with the generation of the intended meaning in the mind of the receiver is a noise. So external noises draw our attention away from the message: a fire engine, the smell of donuts, someone's lunch in the microwave. Internal noises, again, that distraction caused by hunger. I'm hungry. Fatigue, headaches, the way we feel, all kinds of factors interfere with the way we think. Prejudice and defense feelings, our biases can interfere with communication, and the unnecessary use of jargons and acronyms. Hence the message from my granddaughter. Still not quite sure what she means, but we have to be careful of that when we are communicating. So what I like to tell you is there's some tips for effective communication. Active listening, definitely listening. Asking questions. If you don't understand or you don't think you heard it correctly, ask the question. And then minimal encouragement, and just give them verbal cues, okay, or nonverbal cues. Okay, I think I understand what you mean. Like the nodding of a head, that would let them know that you're paying attention. Paraphrasing or clarifying. So what you're saying is that we don't have enough forms for the meeting for tomorrow. There you go. You got it. You got to clear it up. Or parroting, saying exactly what they just said. Is this what you just said? Reflecting, again, showing meaning. And then there's silence. Sometimes you can just be quiet and they'll repeat it in a different way that you understand differently. So it's really, really important. Speak at a moderate pace, not too fast, not too slow. Speak confidently, but with modesty. State your needs, wants, or feelings without criticizing or blaming. Summarize key points made by others. Refrain from speaking too often or interrupting others. Request feedback. That's a really important one. Ask them for feedback. What do you mean by that? And that doesn't mean what you mean by that. It's more of a, I'm sorry, I don't understand. What do you mean by that? Notice the nonverbal cues and respond verbally to verify any of that confusion and diffuse any anger or whatever is happening. You can also ask open-ended questions, and that will give you more information. And remember to remain calm if someone's agitated, and try not to tell them to calm down, because it never works. And to make sure that you convey messages concisely. That means using short sentences, clear and concise words, excuse me, regular English or Spanish or whatever language it is, okay? And then effective nonverbal communication, always establish good eye contact, not staring. Use your posture to support your words and show interest. Pay attention to the other person's nonverbal cues and be careful of cultural differences, and pay attention to appearances and adapt to the situation. Sometimes we have to pivot and adapt to the situation. Good. Excuse me, I always do that. I get into these workshops and I start coughing. I'm so sorry. Actually, and that I need to know if you have any questions or comments or suggestions or things for me or each other.
I was just gonna express an observation about eye contact, because in lots of cultures, it's rude actually to look people in the eye when you're speaking. So, which is weird for Americans, I feel like, but so I feel like that is having to be a quick assessor of another person's body language and nonverbal communication right up front, to know if that's culturally appropriate or not.
True, true. And it makes sense to pay attention to that. So yeah, I like that. I like that. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Kind of to piggyback off of that, something that I've noticed within myself about how I communicate is when I'm listening to somebody, I'm really good at making eye contact with them. But when I'm speaking, I tend to look all over the place. Is that common?
Me too.
Really? That's interesting. I'm gonna go with depends. I think it depends on the conversation. But I would caution to be aware of that, because the person who is listening to you may interpret things differently. If you're telling someone something and you're looking around the other way, it makes it sound like, I just want to hurry and get this out so I can get out of here, kind of thing. And they may interpret it wrong. So yeah, maintaining some kind of eye contact is usually pretty good. Is
So
a good idea to focus on.
Tamara, can I say I tend to do that as well. It's not like I'm looking in some odd place. It's just that I've heard, and I've heard some research on this, and it has to do more, I'm doing it now, it has to do more with your thinking processes. Like some of us are more visual thinkers or more auditory. It depends on sort of where your processing in your brain is going on. So it may be more a function of you. And it may be, and I know I have to work at it. You know, I have to train myself to really focus, you know, on eye contact. But it's not indicating anything's wrong. It's just that that's how you do it. Some of us talk with our hands, and some don't. You know.
Yes, that's true. That is true. That's very true. I find that I do look around when I'm talking. I try to, but I try to make it a habit of looking at the person who's talking to me if it's a one-on-one conversation. In this instance, and when I'm doing presentations, I'm always looking at everybody's face because I'm trying to see whether or not they're looking like, oh God, this is boring, this is almost over, or wow, this is really interesting, or, you know, so that's why I'm always looking. And Zoom has taught me that. I probably didn't do it as much before Zoom, but Zoom has taught me that now, to just look around the room and look at all the faces. So, but yeah, I think if someone is talking to me and they're doing something else, not doing something else, but looking somewhere else, I there again is that's that outside noise that's interfering with your communication process. And it happens because it's there. So it's not a bad thing. It's not like, oh, you're this horrible person, you're not looking at me. No, it's because that outside noise is always there. And it takes concentration, it takes focus, and it takes practice to try and block out those outside noises so that what you're trying to say isn't misinterpreted. Anything else? You guys were great, and time flies when you're having fun. I was like, oh my God, it's gonna be, I thought it was gonna take forever, but here it is, 4:53. So I don't want to take up any more of your time. Earlier, I put in the chat box a workshop evaluation. It's a PDF, it's fillable. You don't have to turn it back in. You don't have to send it back to me. But if you want to, you can email me it whenever you want. And I'm putting my email address in the chat box for you.
I think that you can only see the messages if you were in. So I know that I wasn't in the time that you dropped it in the chat. If you want to redrop that, that would be helpful.
Sure. Let me just redrop it. Not a problem.
Thank you.
Okay.
I can also send it with the follow-up.
Okay. I actually just popped it on my desktop. Now, there we go. There it is. Cool. So I'd like to thank you all for joining me today. I appreciate your time. I hope something was good. Some part of it was good for you, and that you enjoyed the presentation. So I thank you very much. Thank you, Mariah, for suggesting me, and thank you for picking this topic. I have several, so thank you very much. And I want you all to have a really pleasant evening. If you're driving somewhere, do it safely. I think it stopped raining here, but that doesn't mean it stopped raining everywhere. And enjoy the rest of your evening, the rest of your week. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Bye.